Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Keep Indiana Learning. My name is Melissa Wally, and I am a digital learning coach with Keep Indiana Learning. Outside of Keep Indiana Learning, in my day life, I work for Hanover Community Schools in Cedar Lake as an educational technology specialist. And then I also serve on the HEC board, and I also serve as a Keep Indiana Learning digital learning coach. Today, we're here for chapter 3 of our book study on UDL and blended learning by Caitlin Tucker and Katie Novak. And we're so excited to welcome a special guest for today's episode. Tim Arnold is joining us for today. Tim?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Arnold. I'm from Richmond Community Schools. I'm actually, I've been in public schools, public education for 34 years. I'll give you a chance to catch your breath. 26 of those years were in the classroom, and I'm starting my 8th as a district e-learning specialist. And I also get to work with these two crazy ladies as digital learning coaches for Keep Indiana Learning and as members of the HEC board. So I'm very happy to be here to talk about this great book.
I'm Diana Knox, and I'm from Clay Community Schools. This is my 7th year as a technology instructional specialist, and I am super excited to be joining my good friends, my fellow digital learning coaches for Keep Indiana Learning and HEC board members to talk about chapter 3, because I think we all are pretty passionate about this topic. And if you're watching this in real time, it's really timely because of yesterday's session with Caitlin Tucker in the Indiana Learning Lab. And I don't know about you, but I fangirled a little bit, like listening to her. And I was like hearing her voice say the things that I had read really resonated with me. So as we start in here today, and I have forgot to advance the slides. That's my one job, is to advance the slides. And I forgot to do it. So we're talking about chapter 3, design, kicking one size fits all to the curb. And I think of another of our fellow digital learning coaches who at one point in time said to us, one size fits all. Who thought that was a good idea? Because that's uncomfortable. And I can hear her saying it. And so if we think about that in terms of design and education, that's going to maybe change your perspective on this as well. So when we first get into design thinking, it starts with a fabulous analogy. And I'm a shoe maven. I love a good pair of shoes. So the analogy resonated with me. And if that analogy was real life, I would imagine that there would be a lot of us walking around very uncomfortable. And I'm trying to picture Tim in a pair of red high heels.
You can picture it, but it's not happening.
But anyhow, to me, that's what I thought. This is what our students must feel like when we employ one strategy for an entire classroom of students. Is that for some students, what we're trying, though we are have the best of intentions, it's uncomfortable for them because it just doesn't work. So some things we have to keep in mind is that the strategies have to work. The strategies that work for us as teachers, they may not work for our students. And it certainly is very improbable that one strategy will work for all 29 of the students sitting in our classroom. So we need to think about varied options. So when we procure lesson options with choices, they help our students get where they need to go. And to do that, we have to become design thinkers. And there are 3 major components of design thinking, which is a focus on user outcomes, diverse, empowered teams, and my favorite, restless reinvention. So here's the Cliff's Notes version of this. User outcomes is something that can feel extremely daunting if you are in that teacher role and you're first starting to look at this, because this idea that you have to identify pathways that are applicable to each and every student can seem like a lot of work. But this is where blended learning models that we have studied and worked on, they really come in and can be a teacher's best friend. The diverse empowered teams is that we need to collaborate with our teams and our students. That's the key piece, is we have to activate our students into that process of planning the learning and help them advocate for themselves and share ideas and talk about things. And that's vital to their success. And then restless reinvention. This is an idea that you're always seeking new and different ways to teach the standard and teach to mastery. We can't rely on a box curriculum because it's not going to work. Those of us in a one-to-one environment, we know that technology alone is always changing. So how many times I can't imagine the times I've heard somebody say, well, I learned how to do this and this is the way it worked last year. And I'm like, yeah, but they've updated that. And that can be frustrating for some, but for me, I love it because it's always improving. It's working forward. So our students need varied pieces of information year to year to help them succeed. So when we make that commitment to restless reinvention, we take ourselves to the next level of co-designing learning experiences with our learners. And that leads us right into the UDL design cycle.
Yeah, so that UDL design cycle, first, I just want to say that I love the term restless reinvention. I'm stealing it. I'm using it from here on out. When I saw that, I was like, yes. And I don't want people to feel like, if they don't feel like that now, it's okay. All of us, I'll just speak for myself, but I mean, there were times when I was like, thank goodness I have a canned curriculum in the first or second or third year of teaching, because I'm just trying to have enough stuff to do before the bell rings to keep these guys busy. But once you know better, you do better. So I don't want anybody that's watching this to think that, wow, day one, we were out there killing it, because I know I wasn't. So when it comes to this UDL design cycle, you're really talking about doing things that you're already being asked to do. Things like creating lesson goals, working on instructional strategies, choosing great resources, and then assessing the outcomes of whatever goals you had picked. That's not changing because of the UDL cycle. What is changing is that you look at those things through the UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. I should have explained the acronym, my bad. Through that lens of UDL to create these blended and flexible learning experiences. So what does that mean? Well, it means things like creating some creative pathways for students to demonstrate what they've learned or what they can do. Or if it's a very specific outcome that you want that is kind of determined by a very rigid rubric, then providing some of those supports and scaffolds to help kids reach that outcome that you're looking for. It also means offering students choice. So whatever their preferred learning path or method is, think, would you rather, as a very simple entry-level example, would you rather read this by yourself, read it with a partner, or listen to it? I'm sure at some point early in my career, I was rigid enough to get hung up on that. Not anymore. The goal is that you get the information, not how you get the information. I don't need to control that anymore. Another idea with the UDL lens would be things like providing a menu of learning resources, graphic organizers, reference sheets, exemplars, really great examples of how this work or this task might be accomplished. And then making sure that we offer multiple means of expressing what they're learning, what they're doing. That's just a key to some sort of authentic assessment and meaningful learning for students. And if you have the book, page 75, I think there was a really great reference chart in there specifically on assessment to take a look at. So that UDL cycle, yes, we've always done. We're just applying a different lens to it and saying, okay, how can I make sure that I'm not unintentionally putting any barriers in front of my kids and what I'm asking them to do?
Yeah. I like what you said there, Tim. And I think the key is you don't have to ever feel like, if you're just beginning with UDL, you don't have to compare, like, I'm just beginning and Tim's been doing this, Tim has been experimenting. I'm not going to compare my beginning with Tim's already in the process. You don't have to feel like you have to do everything at once. You can just kind of dip your toe in the water, try some things out, and then advance a little bit more as you feel more comfortable. There is no right way to go all in. You can just kind of go in slowly with your own comfort level, and that's okay too. And then, can I just say how much I appreciate the way that this book is written? And I feel like I've already said that before, but the concrete comparisons that Caitlin weaves into her writing. She was talking about educators as architects, as she was talking about designing her own home, and comparing educators as to architects as they are designing their learning experiences. I feel like that really brings meaning to the design process as you think about that with the choice. It just really brought it to me. I learned that way. Like I have to have a comparison, and I just love the way that she writes. So, like you, Diana, I was kind of fangirling yesterday, and I just not only is it good content, but it's just enjoyable reading. So, part of what she says in that part about being an architect of a learning experience is just really about good teaching, listening to your students and learning from them. That all comes back to relationships. We see this over and over and over. It's not new. We have to know our kids, and we have to know what they need academically and emotionally in order to personalize their learning effectively. And that's the same with UDL. We have to let the students do the work. Although it feels very daunting, what we're doing with this process is we're just creating the plan, and then the students are doing the heavy lifting. They need ownership over their learning, like the time, the place, and the pace, in order to create the meaning for themselves. So it's not sage on the stage. We're flipping that, and they're actually creating the meaning. So we have to let them do the work. And I love the next little bullet point that she had: make peace with the mess. Learning is messy. And at face value, when you think of that, you think of projects with cardboard and glue, and you think of a classroom physically messy. But it also includes the mental mess that includes experimentation and confusion, revision, and failure. And that struggle is the work, but the success at the end is the payoff. And we know that students learn through hard work. And I think that phrase, nothing good comes easy, is so true in that learning process. And then demonstrate your commitment to learning with your design. Designing learning experiences. And this one really, I can speak to this one. Designing learning experiences is cognitively challenging and cognitively engaging. That's a direct quote from the book. I love that sentence because it speaks to the value in the work, but it also speaks to that mental fatigue that we all feel when we really work on something and you feel like, why am I so tired? It's that mental fatigue. And that's what happens when you really are working and you're bringing that online and that offline learning together, because you're basically reinventing learning opportunities for your students. That is a lot of work. And so that's when you're really committed to learning and redesigning all of that. It's a lot. But that payoff for the educator, you're recouping your time spent on your design during the lesson. Does it take time and effort to design learning experiences for our students? Absolutely, it does. But there's also time that goes into building in procedures in the classroom as students learn new routines. There's time that it takes to reteach students or go back and explain to them why the choices that they made maybe weren't the best choices. All of that time, though, is going to be paid back to you because you yourself will have time in the classroom available for small group instruction. And so that can be used for reteaching, feedback, assessment, small group and individual work with students. And that always will benefit our learners and will help build those relationships. So it's really a win-win.
That's so true. And, when I was reading and I was thinking about my journey here, I was in the classroom for 17, 18 years before I made this shift into educational technology. And when I was given a device in my classroom, I wasn't given a lot of instruction for how to teach with it. And so as I read now and I'm thinking back to the things that I was doing, I was terrible the first year, terrible, admittedly. But I was committed to the people. And then now that I'm reading, I'm like, oh, I did that. Oh, I was doing something good. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing something good. So I got into where I had like the whole group rotation model. And I can say that like from some of the things that I was doing in the time that I got back as a world language teacher, to have that time to pull students that needed some enrichment, to pull students who had been absent back and work with them one-on-one. Oh my gosh, that was amazing to have. Because my students were watching a video where I was teaching grammar. So I was really in two places at once, and that was so fantastic. And if you know me, people are my jam. Relationships with students and people, that's where I live, love, thrive. That is my passion. And so this topic, when we got to this point in the book, and it's funny because my book naturally falls to that section of this chapter. Like when I just flip it open, there it is, because it's like my holy grail. But we know that in a traditional classroom, we just don't get that time. We just don't have it. When you're doing everybody on the same page at once, you're busy doing all the same things. You don't get that time to sit and conference with your students and talk to them. And so I think that looking to bring those students in as partners in the planning process, that's so valuable. And I love that they have developed, and Catlin talks about the 4P framework that helps guide those teacher and student interactions and student conferences, or I guess they call them teacher and learner conferences. Because I think when we first start looking at that, it is a new concept for us as we kind of go on this pathway to UDL, blended learning best practices. So these P's stand for purpose, preparation, post-conference plan, and parent communication, because that's another thing that I think is really important. And I loved that she really goes into depth here. And then also there is a resource that you can get access to through her that kind of gives you the template that she's designed. And I loved, like, she even suggested in the text to flip it back and put the student in charge of some of that parent communication. And I think that, especially at the secondary level, that's something that sometimes gets lost, is communicating with the parents and really bringing them into that partnership with the classroom. So the conferences, when you meet with the teacher and the learner, they help shift that focus of our classrooms to supporting individual learners and personalizing their learning. And you actually do a good job of kicking that one size fits all right to the curb.
Yeah, so the next section here really talks about some of the just great examples of what this could look like in your classroom. And I'm always appreciative. I'm more of a humanities background, but they gave an ELA example and they gave a math example. So when you get your copy of the book, or as you're going through it, make sure you look at both of those, because they're pretty stellar. They did give a shout out early on in this next part to the Modern Classroom Project, which I think is well worth your time and energy and effort. But just to give you a very quick breakdown of how it connects with what we're talking about here, is the Modern Classroom Project usually builds their curriculum around must do, may do, can do. So students know there are certain things that they must do from this list. There are certain things they may or should do, and then things they can do. So it kind of takes care of your early finishers or folks that are looking for something a little extra at the end. So everybody doesn't have to get there at the same time. So that's worth taking a look at outside of what we're talking about here. But the example I really want to focus on here is I gave an example on narrative writing, which a lot of people do, not just in English. As a social studies teacher, we would have done some of that as well. But under methods, they just gave great examples of choices and options. Do you want to read? Do you want to watch? Do you want to find out some of this basic information in a scavenger hunt, or what we used to call a web quest, something like that? Do you want to work alone? Do you want to work with a partner? Great spot again for that. Would you rather? Would you rather work alone or work with somebody? Would you rather read or listen? And then, do you want to read a physical text? Do you want to listen? Do you want access to a digital text? I can do any of those, but I'm telling you, at my age, give me the physical text and give me something to mark it up with. I want to mark up the text and write on it, take my notes. And then, if I want to do it again, maybe I'll listen to it next time. But make sure that we offer those kind of options to students. They gave for assessments on how they showed what they learned in this narrative writing process. They gave 5 options on how a student could show what they learned or were able to do. And I love this one. I hadn't seen this one before, but there's a whole section in there about if you're stuck, do this. And there's a series of options there that said, if you're stuck, do this. Some teachers use a bell. They can come up and see the teacher. Some teachers build in a time where the small groups are going to come to them. In between there, what do you do? I like using some sort of a digital back channel where a kid can get a question to me, even if I'm not meeting with their particular group. And I can look at it as soon as I can look at it. I can look at it and answer it. And now we've gone beyond the walls of the classroom, because they might not see my response till they get home. But if that helps them get over the hump and they can keep working, good for them. One of the things that I've learned that I got from Catlin Tucker and some others in this area is probably the easiest way to start this is just take a single lesson. And the words that I would use is take it from vertical to horizontal. A lot of us, when we plan things, we plan vertically. We just list this thing, then this thing, then the next thing. If we just take that and turn it on its head horizontally, those become our stations. Those become the different parts of what we're doing, whether it's a whole group station rotation or an actual station rotation where you see kids at different times. That to me is the easiest way to teach taking that next step in this process. So you can have your offline activities. You can have some teacher-led or teacher station activities. That's where you get to provide a lot of your mini lesson or direct instruction. Instead of to 30 kids, it's to 4 or 5. You can do it through video still even there. You can offer supports and scaffolds at that point. You can have an online activity built in, either for exploration or for reading, listening, gathering information. And then you can finish with either an offline or online activity. There's nobody here in this conversation today that's going to say technology all the time for all things. That's not what blended learning is about. And that, frankly, that's not what good teaching is about. So we're not going to advocate that. But what we are going to advocate, and what this book and this section of the book advocates, is students having some control over that pace. That's one of the items. And I'll tell you where I stumbled with this is, in my mind, when I first tried it, I thought, okay, yes, but I got to have this done before they leave, because I was trying to fit it into the bounds of a 45-minute period or a 90-minute block. Why? I don't know. Couldn't this take 2 or 3 days? Yes, it could. So don't pin yourself into something, just because that's the way you think it ought to work. That was a barrier that I had to get over for myself. Another big emphasis here is that students have or need to have voice and choice in their learning pathway and methods. So that's a big part of offering all these choices and activities. And then finally, and it's been mentioned, but it's really a theme of this chapter, the teacher now has time for small group, one-on-one instruction, that what I call the magic time. That's where the best teaching gets done. You can add your scaffolding, you can add your supports. That's where it gets done. And you want to see them, whether it's in a particular class period or over a course of 2 days, you're going to get time with a small group that you would not and cannot get if you're teaching in front of the room to 25 or 30 kids. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the keys from that part of the book, this chapter.
Yeah, this chapter really covers a lot of ground, I think. But what that brings us to is, where are we with our own personal UDL journeys? And so, speaking for myself, I'm not in a classroom right now, but I think I would really enjoy teaching using the UDL guidelines and blended learning. I've been in education for 25 years, but I've been out of the classroom for 12 years. And so 12 years ago, things looked much different in my kindergarten classroom. We did have laptops. Students were on technology, but it wasn't anywhere near this. So now, in my role, I prepare professional learning. I do incorporate UDL as a best practice. I think the playlist model has been successful for me. Educators appreciate choice for many of the same reasons that students do, and it's just as important. And then, as a learner myself, I've experienced many different learning experiences and know all too well the feeling of the stress that exists when choice isn't given and the relief when it is. How about you, Diana?
So for me, boy, does the joke is, if you've been around Melissa and I, we spend a lot of time together and we think a lot alike. So I could just say ditto and call it good. But I did not teach kindergarten, so that would be a scary concept. But I think about, I'm year 25 in education, year 7 of working with educational technology. And I think about that transition to one-to-one. And there are times that I think, man, if I could just go back to the classroom and take what I know now with me. By the way, if anybody from my district is listening, I'm not really offering. I left my position now. I don't really want to go back in the classroom. But if I could take that knowledge. And so I think now working with adult learners, I'm going to echo what Melissa said. The playlist model has been the most successful. But what I've also learned is I still have to help them learn how to use it. They still need that modeling because it's so different from how they have been taught in the past. So while they appreciate it, they still need a little coaching on how to best implement it. And I think that's something that we have to remember with our students when we're making these shifts, is that we've got to model and we've got to really talk to them about the why of these shifts and help them understand their role, because we can't just assume they're magically going to get it. So I love just learning more and more about this and thinking about ways that I can apply it to my practice, and that I can also coach our teachers in some best practice uses in their classrooms.
So again, same story here, not in the classroom currently, but I do have a group of kids that I work with weekly in our 5th and 6th grade building here in Richmond. And we call it book club, but it's really, we do it all. We do all kinds of stuff. And I'm never sure quite who's coming or how many, but there are some that are there every time. And so I've gotten to try a lot of this stuff, and I really, really appreciate that. I'm not going to pretend like doing book club once a week is anything like what you in the classroom are doing full time. I know what teacher tired is. This isn't teacher tired. I get that. So take what we say here with a grain of salt, but understand this is where we've arrived after all these years of experience. 26 years for me as a 7 through 12 social studies teacher. Social studies, it was either on a scale from totally ignored to vilified, depending on the political climate, somewhere in between there. And rarely did I have a paraprofessional in my room, because they were where they needed to be, whether that be an ELA classroom or a math classroom or wherever. And that's so I had to figure out what is it that I can do to get myself more of that magic small group time. And so I'll be very transparent and say that it seemed to come naturally in terms of station rotation with my younger students, my 7th grade students. But for the life of me, I cannot figure out why I didn't use it more with 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. I don't know. I keeps me up at night that I think, wow, I really missed an opportunity with those kids. If you're watching, my apologies. If and when I get that opportunity, I'm going to make sure that I do some of that. But I was involved mainly with station rotation, but we're building in supports through technology. I did help lead a one-to-one initiative in a prior school district. And once we had those Chromebooks in the classroom, that made the ability to clone yourself so much easier. And now you got to design really top quality stuff for them to do while they're not with you, but it's doable. So all of that experience led me to the jobs that I'm in now as a district e-learning specialist. And ultimately, it's led us, we're about to kick off next Wednesday, what we in Richmond here call the blended learning cadre. It's based on a model that we went through here. It was led by Megan Tolan, who is the Dean of the School of Education at Trine University now, and a friend of ours and a HEC board member. And we've really based it on what we learned from her, but it's 8 or 10 teachers that we're pulling in from all of our buildings to really, really focus on blended learning and obviously that UDL lens. So that's kind of full circle for me, but I'm so excited for this initiative, and I'm so excited for the teachers that we have coming in, because I know that they're struggling in some areas right now, and I think we can provide some really concrete and fantastic things with them. Matter of fact, even though we're talking about this book today, the book we're using with our cadre is another one from the same authors. And so totally pumped about getting to work with these folks and going through this process with them.
That's really cool.
That is so cool. I definitely want to follow along on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
So we are so glad that you've spent some time with us today. There's so much to unpack and so much to share, but we're kind of at the end of our time. And so we want to think about some reflection pieces. And I think that I can speak for all of us when we say we're committed to restless reinvention. And as we work together as learning partners, I can't stress enough how vital I find that team concept to be, because I know that we may not be working in the same buildings or even the same districts, but we usually find ourselves working on similar projects. So don't be afraid to grow your circle and make connections and lean on others, because I couldn't do what I do without these two people here, and then a whole other army of people that I am so grateful to call my friends. So as we kind of close up and reflect, we want you to think about, as an educator and as a designer, and we talked about that this is hard work and this is where it takes a lot. You're called to architect learning experiences for all learners by creating lessons with flexible goals, methods, materials, and assessments. So as you think about your current practice, which of these areas would most benefit from, I have a typo right there. Seeing the dual lenses of UDL and blended learning. So thinking about that when you're architecting, would it be your goals, methods, materials, or assessments? And as we close out, we want to thank you again for taking time to join us, because we know your time is precious. So whether you're joining us live or you're watching this later, we are so grateful to you for spending time with us as we go through this book. This chapter and others can be found in the YouTube channel for Keep Indiana Learning. You can scan the little barcode there and get into the YouTube playlist. Melissa and I are so appreciative of Tim for joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, he's the first of some special guests. So you'll see some other digital learning coaches joining us. And we will see you back here in 2 weeks for Chapter 4.